With millions on the road, the small block mouse may be revered, but the big block rat rules.
To power the Super Shoebox, the hands-down choice was a 502 Ramjet. Forged steel crankshaft, forged aluminum pistons, hydraulic roller cam, and oval port aluminum heads.
Now, we know it's a powerful package, but one that's easy to get up and running. All it needs is 12 volts, some fuel, and an exhaust system. Now, once installed, it's going to make about 510 horsepower at 5,100 RPMs, 565 foot-pounds of torque at 3,200. I'd say that's a lot of grunt for about $9,000.
And what GM sent us is the latest version of the Ramjet. Now, they've made some improvements to the computer that include provisions for an O2 sensor, and, well, that's going to allow the EFI to operate in a closed-loop mode. Now, you may not know this, but some of the earlier Ramjets had a problem with a fat fuel mixture, and, well, these changes are going to improve the cold start and the idle quality while sharpening up the throttle response. Now, they've also added a diagnostic port right here in the wiring harness that's going to allow you to monitor the trouble codes. Well, we've already gone ahead and removed this top plenum, as you can see, and that's going to allow us to put the chain to it, get the motor over here so that we can mate it up with our transmission.
To make our 55 truly roadworthy, we wanted an overdrive transmission to make it a long-range cruiser, but we also needed one that could hold up to the massive power of that big 502. So we went with this 4L80E from TCI. It's an electronic transmission that's controlled by the computer, and since it was designed for medium-duty trucks, it'll be more than enough to handle the torque of our 55. Let's get it bolted up.
The weight distribution of this car will be 51 to 49, and that's about as close to a perfect 50-50 as you can get.
With the engine and trans bolted down, I can go ahead and measure for our drive shaft. And it looks like about 51 3/4 inches. I'll go call that in.
Well, it looks like we made a good call on our headers, too. Now, what we were looking for was a set that would tuck up nice and tight to the block here and still give us plenty of clearance around the frame and access for our steering shaft. So we went ahead and spec'd out a set of these Hooker block hugger headers with the optional metallic ceramic coating.
We're fabbing up the exhaust today using some 2.5-inch mandrel bent tubing from Flowmaster. Now, it involves a lot of cutting and fitting, but once we get it all pieced together, Flowmaster will use it as a template to bend up a system out of aluminized tubing.
Now, the guys can finish the Shoebox's exhaust system. These Hush Power mufflers have a heat shield that'll protect the fiberglass body that goes on next. Up next, an all-glass custom body, chopped, shaved, and smooth. And now back to great builds with Courtney Hanson and our Chevy 55 SS.
Well, we're ready for the next phase of our 55 Chevy Super Shoebox. Now, Joe, at this stage of the build, you guys were ready for the new body, but how do you improve the styling over the popular Chevy two-post Bel Air?
Well, it is a timeless design, so our changes had to be subtle. But dealing with fiberglass, you can create a contemporary classic that's a little lower, a little sleeker, but still a 55. So, Courtney, we went right back to the guy who had the idea for this thing in the first place, a guy who had the determination to make this thing happen.
I can almost smell the resin.
Okay.
John Bohannon has a reputation for being one of the best in his business. He uses fiberglass to create cool car bodies. And turning an idea like the 55 SS into a reality requires his kind of experience.
Everything has to fit perfect. Everything has to be coordinated. You can't build one thing and then build another thing. You have to build it all together to make everything match up and work.
John has incorporated some touches never featured on the original 55, like this dash top that comes off so you can access the AC or even the master brake cylinder. Of course, the process starts with a series of molds from a real steel 55 that are sprayed with gel coat. Then, 3 layers of fiberglass bonded with resin along with a catalyst to prevent shrinking. The molds must set up overnight before they're ready to come out. Notice how the floorboards and inner fenders come out as one massive piece. After some grinding to smooth out the edges, they're ready for the next step, which in this case is a coat of liquid insulation called lizard skin. It contains tiny ceramic particles filled with air to shield the body from heat and act as a sound deadener. The dream is closer to reality. Now Joe and Mike can drop the freshly made body onto its new rolling chassis.
Before we can do that, though, we've got other things to handle, like fuel and brake lines, a drive shaft, and, of course, accessories for this big block here.
The original 55 didn't have an accessory drive, and it used a generator instead of a much improved 100-amp alternator. This front runner system also houses a reverse rotation water pump. Then, after the crank pulley, a power steering bracket, and then the main bracket, followed by the tensioner.
Finally, I bolted up the power steering pump we got from AGR, and once it's tightened down, all we have to do is install our belt.
Man, what a sweet looking setup, especially after the chrome work we got done at Advanced Plating. I mean, check it out. Everything from this intake and valve covers, control arms, coilovers, and, well, a whole lot more. But after all, we do want our shoebox to be the goingest, showingest, shiniest 55 on the road.
Yeah, but we also need those big Wilwood brakes to bring this car to a halt. So we're using stainless steel lines and fittings from Pure Choice. Now, if you've never done this before, the only tools you'll need are a tube cutter, a flaring tool, and a tube bender. To use the tube bender, all you need to do is load it up, find your angle, and make the bend. Well, that's it for the brakes. Now notice how we use stainless steel clamps along the frame rails to hold all of our lines snug and in place. Oh, and one more thing, we even mounted our proportioning valve here on the frame rail for easy access.
Hey, great job on those brake lines, but here's a little tip for you guys that might be new to this. You want to connect those hard lines here at the brakes to about 15 inches of steel braided line. Now, that's to allow for movement in the suspension and steering. Man, you are on the ball today, Junior. Hey, we're also using Pure Choice fuel lines. These are 3/8 diameter, and as you can see, we're running them on top of the frame rail all the way up to the fuel rail. Once we get our fuel tank installed a little later down the road, we'll run a short piece of braided line from this fuel filter to it, and that'll prevent any vibration from causing a line break or leak. Now, of course, with fuel injection, you got to have a return line, and we'll run ours parallel to this fuel delivery line we just installed.
Now, no matter what kind of mount you're using, your engine's always going to get some torque movement. Now, we're using a stainless braided line here to feed our big 502's fuel rail. Now, this line is flexible, so just like out back, that'll help prevent any line breakage or leaks.
The custom-made drive shaft just arrived from Dynotech. The final task before body and chassis come together.
We're about ready to drop the body on our shoebox chassis, but first, check this out. In order to eliminate any vibration or noise travel, the body's going to rest on these reproduction rubber mounts from Classic Chevy.
Yeah, but right now I know what you might be thinking. How are those two guys going to lift this body and place it on that frame without getting help or a hernia? Good question. I mean, this thing is fiberglass, but it's got to weigh about 500 pounds. We got the answer right over here.